الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأصلي وأسلم وأبارك على عبده ورسوله محمد. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. Dear brothers and sisters, today we will continue our surah number 4 in the Quran, Surah Nisa, named the Woman. This is the second longest surah in terms of number of letters and words after Surah Al-Baqarah. It is filled with rules and regulations, and the theme of the surah is very clear, very evident when you read the surah. It's a long surah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it very easy to understand. We know that Surah Fatiha is the opening, and it says, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This explained in Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran. إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, that we seek help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It shows in this surah. This surah, the main theme is how weak are we? And the second part of the surah, we will continue in the second khutbah, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing all humankind, beginning of the surah. Ya ayyuhan nas, ittaqu rabbakum. Have fear of Allah and be mindful that He has created you from a single soul. Then from this single soul, He created His mate, and then He created lots of people. And He ended by وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ رَقِيبًا, as Allah is watching you. So how weak are we? In the whole surah, Allah talks about weakness and weak people, minorities, and some of the subjects. Again, we are not doing any tafsir or any summarization of the Quran. It's just in this khutbah, I am inspiring you and motivating you to read the Quran to understand the general theme and the subject of the surah. Then you can understand the will of the intention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you are reading this surah. In the past in the past month, we had a hurricane. Do you know how big is the hurricane? To know how weak are you, you see, you are running away from air and water, something that you cannot live without. But now you are seeking shelter out from these two, because this is the soldier of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With all the technologies that you have, with all the information, with all the power that man have, especially in this country, you cannot do anything about it. The only thing that they can do is to take shelter and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection. 50 million tons, that's a lot of water. 50 million tons, around 120 million gallons. It's like 70 million Olympic pool is moving towards a small part of this earth. The energy inside the hurricane, an average hurricane, is equivalent to 7 to 8 nuclear bombs per second. It's a lot of power that you cannot do anything about it. And again, it's made of air and water. But this is to put in perspective and to show the fact that how weak are we. In the last couple of years, something happened, the pandemic. It shows us how weak are we as an individual, as a medical community, as a planet by itself. The whole planet was shut down because of something that you cannot see or hear or touch. Actually, there's no weight for it. They call it mass. And it's very tiny that you have to have a lot of supercomputers to know its mass. To put it in perspective, there's around 700 million people infected by this virus. 70 million died. But the 700 that infected by this virus, it only needed 1,000 viral particle just to kill you. And if you got the mass of all the people who got infected by this virus, the 700 million, and you want to know the mass, the weight of that matter is equivalent to 1/667 gram. I will put it in a practical term. Pumpkin seed. You take one pumpkin seed and you divide this pumpkin seed, because it's 1 gram, divide this pumpkin seed 700 particles. And you take one out of the 700 particles. This killed 700 million people. Infected 700 million people and killed 70 million people. And you cannot do nothing about it. There's no cure of it. We are so weak that everything that you do, it's not up to you. Like, for instance, you cannot say, I will not sleep. أنت مقهور. You cannot say, I cannot sleep. You have to sleep. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed and willed upon us, all of us. You cannot say, I will not get sick. It's not up to you. Every person in his life must get sick, somewhere or another. And the ultimate one is that you cannot say, I will not die. Nobody can say, well, it's not my day today to die, or I will not die. Nobody said that, and nobody would say that. This shows you how weak are you, and how weak are we. Compared to animals, the weakest animal that you know, in several hours, it will hatch, like an egg or something. It will hatch and try to look for food. In 6 months' time, this chicken that you see is weak is an adult. It can actually bring somebody like him, like it can create somebody like him. It's an adult. 6 months. An elephant will hit puberty in 10 years. What are you in 10 years? When you are 10 years old, you cannot do anything. You can walk and you can talk you cannot take care of anything. This is you compared to the animals that we see. The only thing that you can do is to have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you get strong from إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. That's why you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. In the adhan, Rasulullah told us when he say لا حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح, we say لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. This sentence by its own, it needs books to understand. So there is no change, nor might or power except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot come to the masjid. You cannot do anything except with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why we are saying this? Because Allah told us in this surah, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Insan, humankind, mankind was made weak. The only power that you have is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because you are weak, you have to always look for weak people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about weakness in many aspects in the Quran. Like inheritance, they are weak. Somebody died and there's an orphan, that's weak. Allah talks about women in this particular surah, and He named this surah the women because there's no superiority between men and women. The only thing is that there's a 1 degree of responsibility. When you get married, somebody have to direct the steering wheel, and this is the job of the man. Doesn't make him superior. It will make him more responsible, more accountable. Again, more responsible and more accountable. And it is punishment that comes with accountability. You have to answer to Allah now because He gave you this. And He knows the weaknesses of the other gender. So Allah gave you this for order you to have 3 things. Like in Islam we say Qayyum, means the leader, the protector, and the maintainer. To lead, to protect, and to maintain. It is your job. In Islam, it is your job as a man. There's many duties for women, and Allah talks about their weaknesses either when they are married or not. But you have to know that Allah gave you this responsibility. And there's many ayat in this surah talks about that. When you read, you will understand. And Allah kept their right and their way of having all of their rights. But everybody is saying that, look at Islam, how we treat women. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you read history, before Islam and after Islam, how men and how societies and how states used to treat women before Islam, and you just follow the guidelines of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this surah in particular, you will find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the rights of all of the things. And sometimes they even better when they have taqwa. That's why at the beginning of the surah, Allah said, Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum. He is addressing everyone, not only Muslims, not only believers. You have to have this taqwa. So again, Allah talks about in particular about women. Again, Allah in particular talks about the orphans. Orphan is a weak point and a weak community in the community, in the ummah. And Allah told us that once you are sponsoring an orphan, you cannot touch his money. You always have to be careful and be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He told us a very graphical scene about if somebody ate the people of the orphan. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if you eat their food, if you eat their money, eating meaning that you acquired without any right, as if you are eating fire inside your belly. This is in dunya. وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. This is only in dunya, as if you are eating fire inside your belly. And minority when it comes to Muslims, minority in other countries, weakness of non-Muslims in Muslim country. You go through the surah and you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about weaknesses, weak groups, and how Allah protecting all of these weak groups. What is interesting about this surah, again, it had 42 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most recurring name is Al-Alim Al-Hakim, Al-Alim Al-Hakim, Al-Alim Al-Hakim, all-knowing and the all-wise or the wise. Meaning that He knows. Al-Alim means that somebody who is within information. But Al-Hakim, add to it the touch of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting all the things in the right place. Because a wise man or a wise person, somebody who puts the right thing in the right place. So Al-Hakim means the all-wise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and He knows where to put all of the things in the right place. When He made that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tayammum, out of wudu, when he made the division of the inheritance, which is talking about this surah. Allah talks specifically in this surah about the inheritance of each and every situation. If somebody died with children, if a man died with children, if a woman died without children, if a man died without a father, with a mother, with all the possibilities. In details, Allah doesn't talk about siyam or salah in the Quran. It's only one ayah in the Quran for siyam and many ayat in Surah Al-Hajj, and that's it. But when it comes to the right of the people, especially the weak people, especially the people who are weak and needs this attention from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah stated their right. And again, you go throughout the surah, you see Allah talks about the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, because this is like the illness, the disease inside the Muslim community. If you have hypocrites among us, then that's a problem, and this will create more weaknesses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a very wise surah. It is long, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it very clear from the beginning to the end about how weak are we. Now, in the second khutbah, we will see the second part of the subject of the surah until the end, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. استغفر الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فكيف إذا جئنا من كل أمة بشهيد وجئنا بك على هؤلاء شهيدا. The second subject, which is very related to this subject, the weakness, is justice. Throughout the surah, Allah will present to you the weakness of any group, and He will present to you how to be just. The whole surah, how to be just. That's why Allah is Al-Alim Al-Hakim. That's why Allah Al-Alim Al-Hakim. Because Allah is saying that I am there. If you didn't bring justice, I am watching you, and I have your punishment. That's why the beginning of the surah, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ رَقِيبًا, Allah is watching you, and Allah is watchful. Raqiba means watchful. This is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The watcher, Ar-Raqib. So be aware that if you have something that you are accountable of, if you have a business, if you have an organization, in your household, anything that you own, anything that can be managed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you. Yes, you have more power. Sometimes you have more power as a CEO or a president or a ruler or a man or a husband. You have more power. But remember how weak are you in terms of your body, in terms of your heart, in terms of your relationship to anybody. You will always remember that with the switch from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will take out these weaknesses. He will take out this power. In a switch, sometimes you know that you are weak by saying other people or your beloved ones are sick and you are weak, you cannot do anything. You will become very weak seeing your beloved ones sick and you cannot do anything about it. If you have the money, if you have the knowledge, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will permit and wills, he or she will never get the cure. So justice comes with power. The more power you have, the more justice is required for you. In your household or your workplace, even to your body, you cannot actually suppress or oppress your own body. And Allah talks about this in the Quran many times. So it's all in a one content that the more responsibility you have, the more just and the more mercy that you should be. So how this ayah that I recited is fit with all that? This is one of the things that Rasulullah ﷺ taught us through hadith. A woman was admitted to Jahannam, went to Jahannam by just concealing and keeping a cat, a kitten. She is very strong, the cat is very weak, she had the power, she kept it in her house, no food, nothing, and she didn't left her to eat from outside. Allah put her to hell. Very easy. The same thing, Allah forgave somebody all of his sins and admitted him to Jannah by just giving a sip of water to a dog. Once you have this power, once you feel this power, it's not something that you can be happy about. Yes, it is good to have it when you use it in the right manner. Other than that, it's going to be a curse on you. And that's why most of the Sahaba were just fleeing away from being Khalifa, because they know the responsibility. Abu Bakr and Umar, and Ali, they all know the responsibility. There's accountability behind it. Allah will ask them. You will stand and He will ask you about each and every single thing that you did, and each and everything single thing that you didn't do. This is for a fact. That's why in this surah, more again and again, the more you have justice, the more you have mercy, you have the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah told us this. Ar-Rahimuna yarhamhumullah. The people who have mercy, the people who act upon mercy, Allah will actually be mercy to them. This is the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the justice of Allah, Allah talks about this surah, about tayammum, that if you don't find the water of wudu, you can make tayammum. Allah talks about when you are weak, when you are traveling, that you can make the salah shorter. They're all in this surah. Allah is all Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Remember, Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Now He's showing us Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. When you are traveling, you cannot make wudu, then you can make tayammum. If you can make salah for Dhuhr and Asr and Isha, you can make it too. And you can combine it. It's okay. This is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you will find many in this surah. I cannot actually summarize or point all the things in the surah. But I will leave you with this ayah. That Rasulullah sallam used to hear Quran from one of the companions. And one day, this companion is reciting this surah, and Rasulullah is sitting down, listening to him, and he recited this ayah. How will it be if we bring from all nations one witness from all nations? So for each nation, Musa and Isa, Dawood, Ilyas, we will bring one witness from each nation, and we bring you as the witness for this nation. فكيف إذا جئنا من كل أمة بشهيد وجئنا بك على هؤلاء شهيدا. Allah is asking, how will it be if He brought Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be a witness on you? So Rasulullah just sitting over there, and he held his knee and said, stop. And he was just crying, because he remembered the day that he will be a witness on all of us, me and you and everybody, because he's the messenger. He brought the message, and Allah will ask him, did you deliver the message? And he will say yes, and he will ask each one of us, and he will come for each one of us to be a witness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on that day, Allah talks about that in the second part of the second ayah, those people will actually wish that they and the earth will be the same, like a dust. Because they know what they have did. وَعَصَوْا الرَّسُولِ. So Allah will bring Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as a shaheed. And remember, your weaknesses will multiply that day. Your hand, your feet, your eye, your hair, all of your organs, all of your limbs will testify against you. How weak is that? This is the weakest point that you have. Yes, today you can do whatever you want with your hand and eyes and legs and all of your limbs. Does it mean that they agree with that? Would you do something bad with your hand or with your eye, with your tongue? Does it mean that they agree with that? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them subjected to you. But in the day of judgment, this is not the case. They will actually bear witness and they will say all of the things that you did. And you will say, I was lying and I was protecting you. I was protecting you, my hand, and I'm protecting you, my eyes. Then they will say, أَنْطَقَنَا اللَّهُ الَّذِي أَنْطَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. Allah had made us talk. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the same thing had He made you talk and make everything talk. So I want you to take away of that. Once you get out in this world, you have to put this ayah in front of you. يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ. So fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you have this. And once you read the surah, you will understand more and more. And please join me to follow the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about making the send of the salams and the blessings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.